Good morning. It's 9 o'clock and time for the Tuesday, March 1st meeting of the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County. If you would, I'd like you to rise for an invocation by Reverend Jack Deal, which will be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mr. Joseph Baird.
Thank you. Let's bow our heads and pray. O God and Father of us all, as we gather to be about the business of our county, we give you thanks for the beauty of this season, the new life springing up all around us, the new tender green leaves, the smell of the citrus blossoms, and even the yellow dust that causes allergies. All signs and reminders of your ongoing creative work in the world. And we pray for wisdom, discernment, and as John Tippin would say, good common sense, that our conversation, the decisions made, and the actions taken might all contribute to the health and well-being and sustainability of our way of life for our citizens and the environment here in this little corner of your creation and beyond. And all God's people said, Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, everybody. We'll move on to item...
Mr. Chairman.
Good morning. I think a nice, friendly hello. And to everybody in the television audience, we're glad you're there. And by the way, I will note to the television audience, there are plenty of seats here. So if you want to come down either today, there's still time, or join us sometime in the future. We love having people here. Moving on to item number 4, additions and deletions to the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I would request to add an item under my matters to the agenda. It's not an emergency, but it is timely. I received the schedule of the spring baseball going on at the Sports Village, and would just like to bring it to the public's attention and maybe get it posted on our website. So I'd like to add
the agenda as amended. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any objections? Passes 5-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
A pleasure. Moving.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Davis.
Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner Fletcher. Thank you for the second.
Moving on to proclamations and presentations. There's a presentation of a proclamation designated March 1st through 5th, 2011 as Mentally Challenged Week. This will be read by Commissioner Joe Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the privilege and honor. As you're aware, Mr. Eugene Slane will not be able to be in attendance today to receive this proclamation, but it is my honor and privilege to deliver and receive as I am a fellow knight. The proclamation designating March 1st through March 5th, 2011 as Mentally Challenged Week. Whereas the Knights of Columbus Vero Beach Council 5629 will be conducting its 39th annual Tootsie Roll Drive to help the mentally challenged citizens of Indian River County. And whereas the proceeds from the donations will be used by the Knights of Columbus for local programs and activities such as the Special Olympics program. And whereas over the past 38 years, Council 5629 has collected over $387,000, all donated to benefit the physically and mentally challenged within Indian River County. And whereas it is altogether fitting and proper to officially recognize this worthy cause and to help create a public awareness and appreciation for all those who will be stationed at many locations about town on March 3rd, 4th, and 5th, 2011, and most of all for all of those who will contribute to that they can from their hearts and pockets to assist the mentally challenged. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that March 1st through March 5th, 2011 be officially observed as Mentally Challenged Week in Indian River County, and that special recognition be given to these dates in support of this worthwhile endeavor, adopted this first day of March 2011, signed by all 5 county commissioners. Mr. Chairman, we've presented this proclamation in awareness just to let all the folks know as they're shopping for their sundries and food this week, that they may see a representative from the Knights of Columbus standing out there with the yellow vest clearly marked, and it's a very worthwhile cause, and all of the donations that are received locally stay within the county, and they're to assist the mentally challenged within Indian River County. As a matter of fact, we incorporate the local citizens to work with us, and the benefactors are actually out there so the citizens can meet the recipients as well. And thank you very much for the opportunity. I'll ensure that this proclamation does go forward to the council.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Move on to item 5B, presentation by Barbara Slip-Ford, Youth Guidance Program Manager. Good morning.
Morning. I actually am going to introduce our board chair, Dee Giannotti, who's going to give the update for us. We just wanted to keep the commission posted on the goings-on at the Youth Guidance Activities Program, and so Dee Giannotti, our board chair, can come up.
Thank you, Barbara. Good morning. Forgive me for using my bullet points. I want to thank you, first of all, for letting us come in today and give you an update on the Youth Guidance Program. Just a little background of our mission and whom we serve. We are, it's the Youth Guidance Mentoring and Activities Program of Indian River County. We serve nearly 700 at-risk children who are in kindergarten through 12th grade, who come from single-parent families living here in Indian River County. We promote positive youth development for these disadvantaged youth in our community by pairing them with caring adult role models, mentors, and engaging them in year-round activities. Our specific goals include improved academic performance, school attendance, conduct, and self-esteem. We strive to break the negative generational cycles of poverty, abuse, and neglect, teen pregnancy, substance abuse, high school dropouts, and those not pursuing higher education, juvenile delinquency, and dependence on society. Just a few stats for you. Shockingly, single parenthood is associated with as much as 87% higher incidences of child neglect than children living in two-parent family households. The reason we believe so passionately in the importance of our work is that research clearly shows that a key factor in determining a child's future success is the presence of a quality, caring adult who is active in his or her life. Children who are mentored are 46% less likely to begin using illegal drugs, 27% less likely to begin drinking alcohol, 52% less likely to skip school, 33% less likely to engage in a fight. We had a very busy 2010, and we're having an even busier 2011. I'll give you just some of our highlights, and we have a lot of stuff going on, but just the highlights. Last year, we provided over $10,000 in college scholarships to 7 of our youth guidance graduates pursuing higher education. And we do have very specific criteria for these children for screening them. This is money that's donated and earmarked specifically for higher education. 66% of our children had either good or improved grades last year, and that's grades of A or B. We celebrated at our Good Grades pool party at the Gifford Aquatic Center with nearly 300 youth guidance children and volunteers in attendance. The Florida Teacher of the Year, Cheryl Connolly, congratulated the children with accomplishments and gave them a motivational talk. One of our many programs to build self-esteem was to provide our 4 new school shirts for every child in the program that needed them. We provided over 50 recreational, cultural, and educational group outings for youth guidance kids this year, including tennis, kayaking, horseback riding, boating, fishing, the theater, and community service projects. We raised over $50,000 to provide scholarships that allowed over 200 of our kids to attend local summer camps. We have provided assistance for our children to participate in music lessons, karate, track, football, cheerleading, basketball, band, gymnastics, and educational field trips so that they will have the same opportunities as their more advantaged peers. We have over 120 active mentors who serve as positive role models for their mentees during their weekly friendship-based get-togethers, and I'm proud to say that I'm one of the 120 volunteers. We have a dynamic new teen mentoring group for all of our middle and high schoolers. We're meeting on Monday evenings at the community church. I've been attending those, and those are going extremely well. We're seeing good attendance and good interaction between the teens. We also have a business mentoring program for our teens ages 15 and up. These teens pair with a local business who would like to assist our teens in gaining job experience in return for the teens' free assistance. We have our first federal grant called the Caregiver's Choice, which helps us finance our programs dealing with children of incarcerated parents. We have a new golf mentoring program in partnership with Sandridge Golf Course. We partner with many of the local service clubs, churches, businesses, and nonprofit organizations in one way or another. Just a reminder to mark your calendars now for our biggest fundraiser of the year, and that's the Tropical Night Luau. It'll be on Saturday, June 4th at the Quail Valley River Club. Last year we sold out for this event 2 weeks ahead of time. As you can see, there are a multitude of ways for every single person in the community who wishes to engage with our organization and our mission to get involved, and we urge anyone who wants to talk to us about ideas they have to call the Youth Guidance Office at 770-5040 or visit our website at ircyouth.com. I want to also thank all of you, the commissioners and the county, for your continued support of this very valuable and worthwhile program. Also, as a member of the Board of Directors, I'd like to ask and invite each of you personally to feel free to attend one of our board meetings at any time. Just give us advance notice and we'll provide you with materials and give you the date and time, and you can come and personally see what's going on with the program. And with that, I thank all of you, and thanks for having us here today.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for a great program. My wife and I have been mentors in the past, and my wife had been a board member for a number of years. And about 2 weeks ago, we saw the girl that my wife Jackie mentored, and she'd grown up to be a fine young woman. I believe she had gotten a scholarship to St. Ed's and went on, and I believe she was working on a master's. I might be wrong there, but she's gone through college and I believe working on a master's, and it was a wonderful thing to see her with her mother doing well and on her way to be a very productive citizen in our country. So thank you for your work, and anybody who's out there, if you have some time, consider being a mentor. It's a very rewarding, and both you and the child will be beneficiaries.
Thank you, Mr. Solari, and thank you for your support and for mentoring the child. That's an awesome story, and it's people like you that are really making a difference.
That was my wife in that case.
Well, yeah,
Thank you.
Fortunately, Jackie did most of the mentoring. We call Bob. No,
We all know who, up here who gets the credit for it. but-
Jackie's differences are positive.
Well, look what she's done with me. I mean, that's...
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ask for recommendations on what we can do. How do you possibly have any additional time to do something that's recommended with all that you have done? So I just want to say thank you once again, and I saw Ms. Ford beaming when you were discussing all of the accomplishments. I don't think it was a matter of, wow, we do all that. I think it was more importantly is look at all the benefit that's created here in Indian River County. So thank you very much for harboring all of these great events. Thank you.
Moving on to the consent agenda. Does anybody...
we have minutes.
Oops, sorry, there are two sets of minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of the December 21, 2010, and the January 4, 2011 minutes.
Do we have a second? We have a second from Commissioner Fletcher. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Now on to the consent agenda. Anybody like any items pulled from the consent?
Item J, Juliet.
Any other items?
Move to amend
I'd like to pull 8N.
in
November.
Move to approve the consent agenda as amended.
We have a motion from Commissioner Davis. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Fletcher. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Item J.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just brought this, I just wanted to know the consensus of the commission. This is regarding the 2011 County Leadership Institute invitation to NACO in Washington. I looked at the cost factor on this excursion, and it's a $1,600 application, which includes an awful lot. I'm sure there'll be some collateral expenses and in addition of flight or travel. And in these austere times, when we're looking at closely examining public safety and a lot of endeavors that government is responsible for, to look at spending over $2,000 for a trip to Washington I believe that we might find better use of that funding. It's a little pricey for the event.
Now, my own feeling on this is that some small percent of the budget ought to be going into different trainings, and if a commissioner feels that this is warranted, and if he's worked his way up the ranks of something like NACO, then that it is, then I'm going to support him on this. I mean, this board has been very tight in the way it's spent money over the last couple of years since I've been here. I haven't seen any commissioner go out of their way to spend excess funds doing anything. So again, if some commissioner here who's basically been working hard for the benefit of the citizens feels that an event like this is going to bring a benefit back to the citizens, I'm going to support him.
Well, and again, it's you mentioned the word him. This is not anything personal at all. Believe me, it's just a matter of this is business.
And we have a budget for business like this, and I don't believe we're exceeding that budget. So again, if a commissioner feels that this is warranted and it's within budget, a budget we established back in last July and approved last September, I mean, personally, I'm going to support it.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Commissioner Wheeler.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Mr. Chairman, and I think that, we don't operate or function in a vacuum here. And any education that we get and further networking that we get, and I applaud commissioners like Peter that are willing to network and do this. And I've been here a long time, and I've done that in the past, but I just think it's important to stay in touch with what's going on in the country through NACO and what's going on in the state. It benefits all of us, and I appreciate him willing to give up time to go to D.C. and to get this training and also to learn and meet people to network with. I think it's a positive thing for the county because we don't operate in a vacuum here. So I'd move that AJ be approved.
Motion from Commissioner Wheeler. Do we have a second?
I'll second it, Mr. Chairman. I'd like discussion.
Commissioner, second from Commissioner Davis for discussion.
I do appreciate Commissioner Solari, or Chairman Solari, the opportunity to speak on this, and I appreciate you pulling it because I really do think that, we do have to be held accountable for the dollars that we spend, and with the discussion we've had on this, it's going to be incumbent upon Commissioner O'Brien to be able to come back and say, okay, this is what we've learned, this is what we've got out of this. And it's clearly not one of those things where more than one commissioner is going. There, we don't have that duplication, and it does take a lot of time to go to these events. And so I will support it, but I appreciate you pulling it for the discussion, and I'm ready for the question.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Passes 4-1. Commissioner Flesher dissenting. Moving on to item 8N, I pulled this simply because it's talking about the scheduled budget workshops, and I just wanted the public to be aware that our budget workshops for the 2011-2012 budget year are going to be held July 20th and 21st.
Mr. Chairman?
One second, I'll be done in a second.
Well, I may change what you're saying.
Okay, but I just wanted to let the public know that we're starting the budget process. So if you have any suggestions, if you have any ways to cut the budget further, if you have any ways, anything that you think we ought to be doing better, now's the time to enter into the process. Some people wait until about September when we're ready to finalize a budget, and oftentimes that's too late to have an effective voice. So now's a good time to be thinking about it and giving us your input, which we'd be happy to get. Thank you. Commissioner Wheeler.
Yeah, I'd like to request that we move that workshop back to the 13th and the 14th of July instead of the 20th, 21st, which follows the Tuesday before, after a commission meeting, those 2 days. And I appreciate you inviting people. I think it's a good thing. I know that before Save Our Homes was here, this auditorium used to be filled with people. And since Save Our Homes has been here, they find out that the homesteaded people haven't been getting the bite in taxes. So we have very few people. I remember the last several years, it's been Jim Granzi and Bob Johnson and Lou and Jim and Frank Coffey. And I would encourage people to come be a part of the process, particularly now with what's going on all over the country and the interest that's raised. But I would request we move that back to the 13th and 14th of July.
I'll ask Mr. Baird if he sees.
Yeah, that's not. I've talked it over, Jason. We can do that.
Okay, so is that in form of a motion?
Yes.
We move it to the budget packet, then will come out the what, 7 days prior to that?
It will come out, actually, the Friday, it'll come out the Friday before that. We're talking right now, if you move it back to, it'll come out the 8th, 7th, or the 8th, is when it'll come out.
We'll still have the same amount of time.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I would ask if the staff could sort of massage the agendas the weeks before and after, because we also have a meeting at that same time, and if we get to both the agenda and the budget package on Friday, it gives us less time for going through the budget, and I'd rather have more time to go through the budget than an agenda package. So, I mean, if there's anything that can go plus or minus a week, I'd just like you to keep that in mind.
Yeah, we try and do that. The only thing that does cause us problems in July is, I think, LDRs, because they've got the same dates, and that's what makes July such a busy month for the commission.
Well, I'd like to thank the Romans for the calendar, because we don't have a meeting the last Tuesday of July whenever we're trying to go to mini-season.
So you're appreciative of Julius, huh?
Julius did a good job, finally, yes.
Okay, so we've got a motion from Commissioner Wheeler, second from Commissioner Davis. All in favor?
Aye. Take the vote.
Any opposed? Thank you. Passes 5-0. Moving on to items 10. We have a public hearing. Request for authorization to submit a fiscal year 2011 grant application for 49 U.S.C. Chapters 53, Section 5307, Mass Transit Capital and Operating Assistance. Good morning, Phil.
Good morning. I'm Phil Madsen, Indian River County MPO Staff Director, and we're here to request authorization to submit our annual 5307 Mass Transit Capital and Operating Assistance Grant. And this is the major component of our operating funding for the fixed route bus transportation system here in the county, the GO line. In all, we're requesting $800,000, which constitutes roughly 50% of the operating expenses of the GO line. Approximately 25% of the expenses come from a variety of state grants that we've been applying for, some that come down as a formula allocation, some that are discretionary. The remainder is made up by a local matching share. Most of that is supplied by Indian River County. Some of it lately has been supplied by the cities of Fellsmere and Sebastian as well. And to go over the grant real quick, we've got our operating assistance in here as well as some capital improvements. The source of those capital improvements is this document, the Transit Development Plan. This is one you're all familiar with that we adopt every couple of years. It has in it a capital replacement cycle targeting our oldest vehicles and replacing those first. Also other miscellaneous equipment that we need to run the bus system. A few other elements of this application. We're in a pool with other small urbanized areas called the Governor's Apportionment, and there are some urbanized areas that are small that don't provide any transit system at all. Those areas, money gets freed up for the taking for the systems that do provide a public transportation system. So we pretty aggressively target the funds that are left on the table from that pool and try to add them to our mix, and that's been part of our success here in Indian River County, obtaining additional federal funding. Probably the biggest part of the success is the efficient operator that we have. As you've seen on the slide, we are actually the low-cost leader in terms of subsidy per passenger of fixed route systems in the state of Florida, so that's something they should be very proud of. And then, of course, we stick to the plan. We come up with ideas of where the best bang for the buck could be obtained, what service areas we should provide. So we use our 5307 grant to provide that service as identified in our plan. I always like to take a look at what sort of threats there are to the sustainability of our 5307 and other grants. In 2004, the feds took some of those threats off the table by allowing larger urbanized areas to use some of this money for operating. The census is over, as you know. It takes about 2 years to tally up the census results. We're watching very carefully what happens to us in terms of our small versus large urbanized area designation. That could have implications for funding. But the implication since 04 is we can still use this for operating with a cap. So we should be okay either way. Most recently, we've heard that the feds are inclined to split the urbanized areas along the existing boundaries. So we're not going to be lumped into one giant urbanized, metropolis from Stewart all the way up to Titusville, as we originally thought we might be. So we'll probably remain a freestanding Vero Beach, Sebastian urbanized area after this census, which would mean we could probably maintain this funding the way we have it. That pretty much summarizes the 5307 grant application, the matching shares, and what's in the grant. I'll be happy to answer any questions. It is a public hearing, and we do need a recommendation to move forward with the authorization to proceed.
Thank you, Phil. Any questions for Mr. Madsen? If not, I will open the public hearing. The public hearing is now open. Anybody from the public wish to speak on this matter? Seeing none who wish to speak, I will close the public hearing. Ask once more if there are any questions by the commission.
Move approval, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion to approve from Commissioner Flesher, a second from Commissioner Davis. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Phil, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
We have public discussion items. Request to speak from David Leland, but I don't see him in the audience right now. If he comes in later, we'll try to fit him in the agenda. Sir?
I'm not David Leland, but I'm Billy Hitchcox, and I've been here before. Just wanted to update a little bit about Gifford Garden since it was already on the agenda for someone to speak. I have obtained a quitclaim deed on the property. It has been registered with the clerk of courts, and we are proceeding with our obtaining the required permits from the county and everything so as we can get those buildings now secured and start moving forward with the cleaning out of everything and then start reconstruction. And I just wanted to let the county commissioners understand where we are.
Commissioner Davis.
To Mr. Plakowicz, where does this leave us with our demolition lien, or not demolition lien, excuse me, our process of the moving forward with the demolition?
Well, first of all, to go back to the statement that Mr. Hitchcox holds a quitclaim deed to the property, what he holds is a quitclaim deed from the, as I understand it, from the entity that has a contract for deed to acquire the property. That's A to Z. In other words, the title holder is MNB. MNB entered into a contract for deed with A to Z. A to Z, as I understand it, has completely defaulted on that contract. Mr. Hitchcox, as I understand it, holds a quitclaim deed from A to Z, not from MNB, the actual title holder. So I really don't see Mr. Hitchcox in a position of holding title to the property. I think what he holds is any residual rights that A to Z might have under that contract for deed, which again, as I understand it, is in default. But the question of where are we in the process of demolition, the demolition contracts have been bid. As I understand it, it will be coming back to this board next week for award on those contracts. And at that point, the process presumably will go forward to demolish the property. Simultaneously, what's happening is the foreclosure is out there. That's set for a foreclosure sale on March 21, so roughly 3 weeks from right now. So we've got these different things happening, but unless this commission votes next week when it considers the demolition contracts to adjust the schedule, then the schedule will go forward with the property being demolished sometime, I would presume, toward the end of March, beginning of April, with the matter coming back to this board for a resolution imposing a lien for the demolition costs.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Davis.
Looking at the time frame for the judicial sale, as well as the time frame for the recording of our demolition lien, would the courts, or would they look at that at the time of filing, at the time the work was done? When would be the date, the line of demarcation at which the county could be cleansed, their interest could be cleansed off the property?
Well, there's only about one thing that's certain in that question, and to me, and that is if we demolish and record our lien prior to the foreclosure sale and issuance of the certificate of title, such that the title issues to the buyer at the foreclosure sale after we have recorded our lien, I believe the law is clear that our lien would be eliminated under that basis. Now, that's the only clear part. The foggy part becomes what happens if we demolish during the sale or after the sale, and we record our lien after the foreclosure sale has been completed. I can tell you there is no answer, no black and white answer to that question. And I've been involved in this world for 20 years. Our position will be that if we demolish and impose a lien after the foreclosure sale, that our lien therefore attaches to the property in the hands of the purchaser at the sale. That will be our position. But can I point to something black and white that confirms that position? No, I cannot. So I think you're in a situation, as you move forward, as I've said before, I cannot guarantee to you that you will be able to recover your demolition costs through a lien. I can tell you we will make every effort to do so.
How would that affect, how after the judicial sale, whenever, and let's assume that the plaintiff credit bids, they get the property back, how would that affect the county's ability to go through the abatement process and then do the demolition after title has in fact changed hands?
I'm not entirely sure I understand the question.
But there's going to be a different owner that's really nothing more than the lender, and our abatement process as far as the demolition has been against a prior owner. And so title has changed hands. Does responsibility or does the process have to start all over again for the individual that is now the buyer or the owner of the property?
No, I believe the answer is clear that it does not have to start over, particularly with the lender acquiring title at the sale. You know, the lender is fully informed on this. We've been sending notices to them from day one.
Okay.
We've published on the public record notice of this demolition process. So we've done everything possible to alert the purchaser at the foreclosure sale that this is out there. So again, I wish there were case law. I wish there were statutes covering this. But just falling back to general legal principles, I think the buyer at that sale is going to be on notice of these proceedings, and I don't think we're going to be required to start over.
That seems, and that's, I'd like to look to make sure of that, because just take it out of the institutional lending side of it, or the foreclosure side of it. If I were bidding at a judicial sale on a house that existed, I bought it, and then 3 days later it was tore down, or no, after the certificate of title. Let's say after the 10-day objection period, it was tore down. I'd be kind of upset.
Yeah, now I will say this. You know, if you were looking for certainty on the lien, if there's a foreclosure sale held, and let me just stop there for a second and say this sale was supposed to have been held back on December 29th. Mm-hmm. It was postponed by the lender to March 21. As of this date, we're assuming it will go forward on March 21, but it could be delayed a second time. But assuming that it happens, if you wanted certainty on the validity and effectiveness of your lien, you could choose to restart your demolition process at that point with the new owner and go through that, and there would be no question that as to the new owner, your lien would be effective. Now, obviously, you're delaying the process by another, whatever it might be, 3 to 6 months.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions by commissioners? Thank you, Mr.
Could I ask a question? If I have a warranty deed from the bank, release of lien prior to next week, what happens then?
It's kind of where I was going with it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
well, the bank, right now the bank doesn't help you much because all the bank holds is a lien on the property itself, a mortgage.
But we're going through a short sale.
Mm-hmm.
M&MB is signing off on it. They're the one issuing the warranty deed, and the bank is releasing their judgment lien through the short sale, so that then Oak Arbor, who I own part of, will be the owner of the property with a warranty deed.
And I think if all of that happens, if you acquire a title from the title holder, which is M&MB, and the bank releases its lien,
mm-hmm.
then you're the owner of the property.
Correct.
Your problem is that the property is in this demolition process. You have notice of it, and in fact, our code requires that your seller, M&MB, notify you of these demolition proceedings. So I think at that point, not really much has changed with respect to our position. In fact, our position may be strengthened a little bit because you are clearly aware of these demolition proceedings, whereas, as Commissioner Davis mentions, in a foreclosure sale, arguably an innocent person could come in and bid and not know about these proceedings. So I think, again, this purely from a legal standpoint, you're still subject to the ongoing demolition process. Now, whether you, as owner, well, let me just finish. All right. Whether you, as owner, want to, petition, in effect, the board to now give you more time, that gives you clear standing to make that argument to the board, because now you would be the owner, and the board perhaps could listen to you on that issue and make whatever decision they consider appropriate.
Now, if I comply with all the requests that have been made to secure the property, have it all boarded up, cleaned out, properly done, that then takes away the urgency for any demolition, because it has been the county commission's request, the health department's request have been met, that the buildings are completely cleared, they are secure, and are in the process of being rehabbed.
Well,
and I can't see why any county commissioner would object to having $2 million brought in to the community for construction people, for suppliers of air conditioning, roofing, the whole gamut of the situation, plus the future tax benefits that the property will bring, rather than having a lien of $160,000 that even the bank admits never get paid. Well, because they're not going to take title to the property. They've already stated that. They are not going to take title to the property. They are simply going through with a short sale. That's all they're doing.
If you want to hear why a commissioner would object, I'll explain why a commissioner might object. The first reason is, well, there are many reasons. The first reason is that this project has been a cancer on the community for many years.
I understand.
And a number of times people have come in and decided that they want to renovate the place, and the cost of renovation has been significantly more than they initially thought. They get halfway through the project and they fail, to the detriment of the surrounding community.
Right.
And from what I've seen of your first proposals, they're grossly underestimate what I would say would be the cost of completing a project like that. So from just based on what I've seen of your prior proposals, you're on the same merry-go-round as the people before you, that you would get this thing started, it'd go to a certain distance, and then run out of cash and fail, and the cycle continues. This is not just about Gifford Gardens. This is, to me, more about the surrounding community, and it's time for us to do things that benefit the community as a whole. Gifford Gardens itself, if you go there and see that it's unrailed, it's unsafe, you realize that it puts not only the neighborhood in jeopardy, but any public service officer who's called to that area. It's time to do something, and do something strong to get rid of it. And I think, personally, based on what I've seen, unless I saw somebody who was very strongly financed and that there was an extremely high probability of success, I would say it's time to get rid of that building and do what we can for the community as a whole. Well,
that's why I'm asking, because I understood from the last time I was here, the county commission wanted $2 million, basically a guarantee of $2 million into the project, which I have. And that's what we are moving forward with, is we're not taking this lightly at all. We have done some very serious understanding of what it's going to take, how long it's going to take, and the cost involved. And I understand the concerns from the county commissioner, because there have been other people, A to Z, M&MV, both who really were not trying to do what we're trying to do.
I was there a couple weeks ago, and there were some signs posted that indicate, I can't remember exactly what they said, they were small, like 8.5 by 11 sheets that were attached to various places on the building. It was basically said that they'd been, the word isn't exactly right, but fumigated, that chemicals had been put in the building. And I was told that you had something to do with that.
So, yes.
Okay, well, that's not a good first step. When you go into a building which you have no right or responsibility to be on, and then say that you've poured chemicals that ought not to have been in there, that's not exactly, in my mind, putting you on the path to say that I'm going to be supportive of that. And that evidently caused significant problems for the health department, for law enforcement, and others, and it is kind of a rogue action.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Fletcher.
In addition, I'm not a building official. We have one in the room, though, and I'm not a building investigator, but in my investigative endeavor over the past 10 years in my former occupation, I've been in those buildings and have seen the continual deterioration that is presented. I don't even believe that we have a proper shell to build on in those buildings. I think it's a lot more than just bringing in the drywall and the rails and the air conditioning and getting everything up to snuff on the electricity. There might be some deficiencies. I think you have more than a total gut there. And at that point, I don't foresee $2 million being the right amount to be able to make that into what you anticipate to make it to. I'd like to see if our building official, Jose, would like to add to that in any way. I see he's just gotten into the room, and I'd like to see if we can add to the discussion on that. I know that he has been there many times. I've been there recently, is just a few weeks ago, and I know that the sheriff has been there. And many people from the health department have been there. There's a lot more challenges that meets the eye, and the public concern is extremely high because they have been given the false promises, the false expectations over the years by people that were going to make a difference, make a challenge happen, a reality, and it just has not happened. And I believe that this beast is just larger than the burden that you want to place upon it. Jose?
Jose Guanch, building official. The buildings in question that we're talking about are in extreme disarray. They are completely, the plumbing has been ripped out of walls, which means new plumbing, disinfecting of plumbing has to happen. The roofs, we have no way of knowing the conditions, but they're not in good shape. Obviously, we've all seen pictures, we've all seen the reports. They are in complete disarray. And it is our opinion, as it is stated here today, the project is going to probably take a lot more than what Mr. Hitchcock appears to putting forward on this project.
Thank you, Jose.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know that I've had people in looking at the buildings for structural integrity, and the buildings are structurally sound. They say there are no problems with the structural integrity of the buildings. Yes, there's some leaks in the roof and things, but we're going to put trussed gable-end roofs on each building, not flat roofs anymore. They'll be matching what's in the surrounding community, and because it's cost-effective to do the trussed roof rather than trying to mess with a concrete roof and keep it sealed. And so that's part of our plan, and it's just a situation where there is so much that we can do that would benefit that community. And the people who live around there, every time I'm over there, I have a lot of people come through with various comments, and none of them have been negative to me or about the property renovation. Yes, they are very negative about the current condition. I agree with that. But they are not at all negative about what we are proposing to do, because they say, you know, hey, we'd like to see these buildings renovated. We'd like to see them utilized for the community. but we don't want to see them just sit here.
No,
So that's
no one's
what
saying,
we're trying to do.
no one's saying that your efforts are not admirable, there's surely a lot of folks that would like to see a useful product at the end of the rainbow. It's just that it just doesn't appear to be foreseeable. I mean, there's just too many challenges with the building, as we heard from our building inspector as well.
Well, we understand because we're even going to change the interior configuration of the buildings. Because those apartments, some of them were super small. And we're going to change some of the interior configurations of the buildings to accommodate better size apartments for today's families. And it's just, those are things that would have had to have been done anyway. Removing some of the electrical, removing the plumbing, and reinstalling new plumbing because it wasn't even to code to begin with. And so we're not looking at that as being detrimental. That is just something that would be done in the process of renovating those buildings. So,
Any other comments?
I'm good with moving forward. I've had concerns about this from the beginning. I think if Mr. Hitchcock has $2 million to put into this, I think he'd be better served by starting from zero and building new units and to try to rehab these. And by going forward with the demolition, we know that will take care of this blight on the community. And then if Mr. Hitchcock ever does get the deed to the property, he can certainly rebuild from scratch and build something new that he could then, just like he's saying, would be a benefit to the community. But I think we've been down this road before and it's failed every time. And and Mr. Hitchcock, weren't you part of A to Z?
No, sir.
Responsible on that?
Have nothing to do with A to Z.
Okay.
That was done, that was Mr. Sean Zarro. I have nothing to do with I don't even have anything to do with M&MB. That's, again, Michael Hooker. Those are people that I do not know personally. All I know is their name because of my affiliation trying to buy the property through a short sale with City National Bank. That's the only reason I know them.
Okay. Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm good with the moving forward with our demolition, and Mr. Hitchcock's just anything you do is at your own risk.
All right, so, but if I own that property before next Monday, and I have clear title to it,
You do so at your own risk.
but I can stop your demolition.
You'd have to talk to our attorney about that. I don't know. The mere fact that you own it would not stop it in my mind.
If I have met the city, county requirements that they have put forth on me, which are to secure the property, have it boarded up, have it cleaned up, have it safe, have it properly taken care of and maintained, that's what, there are many buildings in this county that are in the same situation, that are not being destroyed because they have been secured. They are being maintained.
Yeah, but they haven't gone through the demolition process, which this one has.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Wheeler?
Yeah, it looks like this may be coming back to us.
Yeah, it should be coming back, as I understand, next Tuesday, March 8th, for approval of demolition contracts. So you really don't have an action item in front of you today.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could, and maybe this would be a good time I would really like to know where the county would stand in that situation from our county attorney.
Well, let me ask a question too, because, and to probably drill deeper than this than we have a right to, but I want to know too, and if this comes back, something I'm going to consider. Mr. Hitchcock, your background, have you done this before? Have you got a history of rehabilitating these apartments?
Yes, I have.
If for the next meeting, I'm going to want to see a track record of success, because that'll have a great deal to do with my position on this, whether it can actually happen or not.
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
My background is in construction. I have my degree is in architectural drafting and engineering from IRCC. I owned a business that was in construction. It was a subcontracting business. We have built assisted in building many buildings in this county, St. Lucie County, Brevard County, Broward County, and Martin County. That is something that is just something I've done in my life. And this is just continuing on where we are moving into, I'm buying houses that we're rehabbing. This is not the first thing that I've done. So, and that's why I have people who have the money who are backing us up.
Commissioner Davis?
Yeah, and I appreciate Commissioner Wheeler's question, but we're not talking about whether it has a track record or anything like that. We need to know if we tear this down, does he have a claim against the county because we didn't do something right, or he had a property interest or right in that property. This has nothing to do with, unfortunately, this specific property nor this individual. This is going to be case law, and I don't want the county to go in there, tear it down, put a $160,000 lien on it, and then him come back and countersue us for $2 million. That's where I want to know where we're going to be.
Well, I agree with that, but also, as I understand it, this will probably come back with a request not to do the demolition. And if that's the case, I'd like to know that I'm dealing with someone that has the ability and the track record to do what they say they're going to do. And so that's all. Just a question as I weigh all this.
Well, again, and from what I gather, Monday you're going to allegedly get a general warranty deed.
That's my intent.
That's your intent.
Yes.
Then Tuesday this will be back before us. So, but I really would, if the commission would indulge, to let Mr. Blackwich, if you'd find out exactly, or give us your opinion anyhow of where the county would sit in the event that what we talked about happened.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yes.
And I think he should talk with my attorney, Barry Siegel.
Okay.
Because
attorneys love billable hours.
What's that?
They love billable hours.
That's right. But there are a lot of legalities that are involved, and that's why I am trying to keep everyone apprised of what we're doing here with the county, because I know for a fact that the county, once they tear those buildings down, if it's $160,000, the county will never get that money back.
That's not, at least for me, that's not the main issue. The main issue is the cancer in the community, which
we're trying to cure that.
Which is bringing down not only the Gifford Gardens, but the entire surrounding community.
I understand.
So $160,000 is a small price to pay to take that cancer away. So just so you understand that.
I understand.
The $160,000 is not the issue. It's a 20-year cycle of bringing a large section of that community down, which has to come to an end. That's the issue, at least for myself.
I understand that, and that's what I'm trying to get done, and I'm trying to assure this commission that that's our whole intent. I'm not someone who is not vested in this community. I've lived here most of my life. And like I said, I've worked in this community. I've held several different positions in this community with different companies and things. And I understand exactly where you're coming from, but I think county commission should look at also what we're bringing to the table as far as future income for this county and the benefits for that community once this project moves forward.
Well, we may be able to take a look at that next week.
All right.
Thank you very much. Move on to C, public notice items. Mr. Plockwich. I'll go ahead and read it if you want. Notice of scheduled public hearing, March 8, 2011. Consider adoption of the ordinance to codify the Code of Indian River County memorandum dated February 18, 2011. This will be a legislative item. Moving on then to Office of Management and Budget. We have Mr. Jason Brown, who's evidently going to inform us about the governor's recommendation on pension reform. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning, Commission. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Jason Brown, County Budget Director. Just want to give the board a brief update on one of the details of the governor's recommendation on pension reform. As I'm sure you're all aware, the governor came out with his recommendation for pension reform a couple weeks ago. It had several provisions. One of those was that the employees would have to contribute 5% of their salary towards the pension. At that point, I thought, well, that will help the county balance our budget. Well, we found out a little bit later that there's a provision in that proposal. Begins on page 210 out of 213 pages that requires any savings that local governments receive from the employee contribution would have to be rebated back to the state through a reduction of state shared revenues. So any county or city that participates, if we save funds, those would have to be rebated. Basically, we estimate that a 5% employee contribution would save the county about $2.8 million, and we would have to rebate our entire state revenue sharing proceeds of $2.5 million to the state for that. One of the problems is the details of county budgeting is that we've got employees scattered across various different funds. Some of those are tax supported, some are not tax supported. So some of the funds are winners and some are losers. For example, our water and sewer utility fund, we'd save about $275,000 there. However, who would lose from that, we'd have to rebate those savings from the MSTU fund and the general fund to the state. So what happens is the utility fund would save $268,000. We haven't been in the practice of transferring funds out of our utilities and our enterprise funds to the general fund, and wouldn't recommend that going forward. So we would have the savings over there in utilities, but the taxing funds, the ad valorem taxing funds, would bear the brunt. Basically, the big loser in this is the MSTU fund, which would lose about $1.1 million from this if it was implemented today. Just wanted to make the board aware of that fact, that we would have a large impact on the MSTU fund, and the taxing funds in general would lose in this. I will say that that's the governor's proposal. There is a Senate bill out there that requires, I think, a 2% contribution from the employees. There isn't currently a provision like that in the governor's recommendation that would require the local governments to rebate that savings back to the state. So we estimate there would be about a $1.1 million savings for the counties if Senate Bill 1130 was implemented as it's written today. If it was a 2% savings. However, we haven't seen a House bill yet. We just want to make sure that any such provision wouldn't be inserted into a House bill or a Senate bill to make it into the final law, because our concern is we've been balancing our budget here. We've ridden the tax roll down. We've dropped $25 million of ad valorem taxes, decreased our workforce by about 24% to meet those. We're dealing with the change in the tax roll and the recession and the reduced revenues. We're just hoping that the state doesn't take an opportunity to balance the state's budget on the backs of the local governments, which has worded this. Basically, these funds go into the state's general fund as written. So we wanted to point that out to the board.
Mr. Chairman, just a question to Jason. Jason, the revenue share, is that not a rebate of some of the sales tax that we collect here in the county?
That is made up largely with a portion of sales taxes.
Right. So, we work very hard in this county to promote our tourism. We have all the ecotourism we're doing. We have our beaches. We spend money to maintain our beach infrastructure to bring tourists here. Our sports tourism. We do a lot of things to bring visitors here that spend a lot of money and generate a lot of sales tax. And basically what the governor's proposing is to take all that away from us, as well as an additional burden on the employees. Now, I don't have a problem with the employees making some level of contribution, be it 2 or 5% or somewhere in between. I think that's probably a good way to go. But for them to then keep it to balance the state books from the sales tax that we collect in this county and work hard to bring in here, I think it's totally wrong. So I don't know, Jason, at this point, do you think the board, should we draft up a resolution opposing the governor's budget proposal, or you want to wait a little bit, see what shakes out of the Senate and House?
It might be just something to keep in mind with the various legislative issues. If the board wanted to draft a resolution, you could. I think it's just something to be mindful to talk to the legislators about and say, hey, the Senate bill doesn't have it in there right now. We haven't seen the House bill. We would like it to remain that way. You know, like you stated, I think it's not inappropriate for the counties to make some contribution to their pension, but shouldn't the county receive that savings if that happens?
Jason, can you give me like a one-page brief on this? Because I'll be going to Tallahassee in 2.5 weeks, and that'll help me, and I'll have something which I can give our delegation. It's actually Bob Keating, he's not here now, but he had that brief on House Bill 697, which for me did a great job of explaining the facts and the county's position and recommendation. And if you can do something similar and maybe give that spreadsheet that's part of this as backup, that would help me tremendously up in Tallahassee.
Mr. Chairman.
We can do that.
Commissioner Wheeler.
Yeah, you know, and going through this, and I talked to Jason again yesterday, and reading the bill, it gets a little complicated following everything. But, you know, as I understand this, I think if we look for a compromise position, and there's probably going to be 2 or 3 different bills going through, I don't have a problem, I don't think anyway, with the revenue sharing. In other words, we could work with the state. If we can cut our ad valorem taxes by X number of dollars by the 5% contribution, that's a good thing. And if the state kept a portion of that money, that helps them balance their budget along with us balancing ours. My concern is, though, is that it should all be attributed to, you know, because the 5%, as Jason pointed out, comes out of the general fund and not out of the other funds that we don't have the ability to go back in. So it's kind of screwing up our bookkeeping. And also being fair with who's paying for what. So if the bill could have in there that, you know, where it's directed to a budget. In other words, this is ad valorem tax money that is saving the county if this were to pass. And so the money that comes back into to the county, that comes back into our general fund, I could see working a compromise with the state saying, well, that portion, but the portions that come back into utilities, the MSTU or others, which doesn't spread it across the county as a whole. In other words, I'm looking for a compromise position because I think it's a good thing to have contributions, and I wouldn't want to just go up and kill that, but I would like to see them reevaluate how this money is going to be divided up, because it is our responsibility to pay that, and we should benefit from it. But I can see if a portion of it benefited the state too, because we've all got budgetary problems. I think we need to look to try and work together for the best compromise position we can that would be a positive, a win-win for everybody.
And I'd like to start more on a side, though, that's closer to Commissioner O'Brien's and more favorable to the county. And then maybe later on, if we had to compromise, work towards a compromise. But the way I see this is that the state gives us a lot of unfunded mandates over time, and this is another way of taking revenues generated in this county, passing them through the state's hands, and then the state keeping a good portion of what's sent up. So I don't look at it as state money. I look at it as county money, which the state unfortunately got its hands on. Well, and over time, if we have to compromise, fine. But I'd rather be towards Commissioner O'Brien.
And the state does this consistently with unfunded mandates in many, many different areas that don't appear to be unfunded, but they are, because they say you got to do this and they don't send any money with it. And what Commissioner O'Brien's saying, that's good. But I can tell you that the problem that I have here is that as long as we all, and if you're watching television or reading the newspapers right now, everybody's trying to protect their own sandbox, and we need to all get in the sandbox together and figure out what we can do to help each other and make it work.
And I think that, Commissioner Wheeler, I agree with you. I think you're exactly right, and we got to keep in mind that, you know, not only are we residents of Indian River County, we're residents of the state of Florida too.
That's right.
You know, and we're constantly fighting the unfunded mandates and probably bringing them up as they were just brought up now, but I think we've created a new term. Unrefunded mandates. We're not getting the refund. The state's going to get the refund. And I think it's time to take it.
Yeah, I thought it was to reduce labor costs for the state and the counties overall. I didn't know it was to reduce it for the state and forget the counties.
Well, it's just the state will be the benefactor.
That's what confuses me.
I think Jason has an idea, and I've got an idea if they can take up to Tallahassee, so I think we're probably good on this one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse.
Move on to departmental matters, utility services, and approval of bid award for IRC bid number 2011029, a floating mat system at the Spoonville Marsh Wetland Facility. While Eric's making his way up here, I'll just inform the audience that last week the Indian River Lagoon Advisory Committee came down to Indian River County for one of their meetings and had a tour of the Spoonville Marsh project, which they certainly appreciated and liked and were very interested in. Charlie Sembler showed what he was doing with oysters for that area, which would help clean up water which is pumped from the lagoon into the Spoonville Marsh. And I think that everybody from the Indian River Lagoon Advisory Committee left the county thinking that the county was on, basically cutting-edge technology and doing things for our environment, which was the right thing, and doing things like providing more oyster beds, which, as this program develops, could help our lagoon significantly over time. So, Mr. Olson.
For the record, Eric Olson, Director of Utilities. This is kind of one of those quiet projects that are success stories that are becoming less quiet. As you pointed out, I got a lot of calls as a result of that meeting that took place out at the marsh. A lot of people are very impressed because, frankly, this project becomes sort of a pilot project for other utilities across the state, because what it allows other utilities to be able to do is look at how Indian River County is working with the reject or the brine water from its RO systems. It's kind of innovative. There are no other projects like this. The success story of this, as we've probably said before, it's a two-part project. It does address the issue of the brine related to the RO projects, but more importantly, what it also does, it addresses the issues regarding nutrient loading reductions for the Indian River Lagoon. In its preliminary stage of the Spoonville Marsh project, we're already seeing we're at a point where we're reducing upwards of 2.5 tons of nitrogen per year out of the lagoon and nearly a ton a year of phosphorus out of the lagoon just from the process in its early stages. We are currently working with, as you mentioned, Charlie Sembler and the oysters. We're looking to expand on that as we move along. This project that we're bringing here today is to put in place these floating vegetation mats. These are very specialized type floating vegetation. Literally, if you can envision, these are marine plants that are actually floating in very specific areas. It helps uptake the nitrogen and the phosphorus. It's a very effective mechanism. In addition to that, what it also does, it sort of creates an environment for small, offspring of the plant, the fish. It becomes a marine, kind of a growing source for the marine fish, and it's just a general process that makes a success story even better. So anyway, long story short, we're here to award the project for the floating mats. This is, again, kind of one of those things that takes it a little bit step further, and a lot of people are, again, looking at us as kind of, gee, we heard about this, and we're getting calls all over now.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Davis.
It's a fascinating project, and we're taking, fresh water that would go directly into the lagoon, mixing it with brine.
Yes.
And creating a brackish water. Right. And cleaning both of those before they go into the lagoon. So you really, two bad things making a positive is really what it boils down to.
And taking lagoon water.
Right, pumping it back through and cleaning it that way. And the oysters, as far as how they're responding to that environment, is just absolutely phenomenal.
It's really amazing, because when we first talked to Charlie Sembler, and as the commission may be aware, his family has been working with the fishing industry for decades. I mean, virtually since the early 1900s. He looked out there and basically did some preliminary water quality tests and looked at it and said, this actually may work. These things are just taking off like wildfire. It's amazing.
And not only that, it's hopefully will act as a hatchery for future oyster beds, and as it gets discharged into the lagoon and the current takes it to the north or to the south, it'll help let Mother Nature basically seed oysters where we haven't been able to do it successfully by
the Department of Agriculture is really kind of looking at this thing as saying, hey, this is an opportunity that we would like to help with you a little bit, facilitate the enhancement of oysters, because you read a lot of projects. St. Lucie County has had them, Martin County has had them, even up in the Chesapeake Bay, where they're trying to reintroduce oysters, and it's a tough struggle. This process has been very successful from the get-go. We've had to compete with the blue crabs out there,
And otters.
And the otters. But it's amazing because, again, we've taken something that has been a very tough project to get started. We have had calls from DEP since that meeting saying, look, we want to make this thing happen. We want to facilitate it, making it even better. So,
Specifically on this, now, I understand the concept, and I see how this would work in a freshwater environment. Floating, you got hyacinths. I know it's the same principle. Then you take it to a saltwater environment, and I can envision sargassum weed, and seaweeds that float out in the ocean. I'm really having a hard time envisioning very many floating brackish plants. I mean, I see it in fresh and I see it in salt, but not brackish. So what
same
kind of
principle. They use it a lot in freshwater lakes for nitrogen, phosphorus uptakes and this sort of thing, using freshwater plants. In this particular case, because it's very specialized, you actually have to use seed. It's not sea grasses like sargassum or anything like this. It's actually the marine type of plants you'd see in the wetland environments around the seashore there. So these are actually marine wetland plants. These are not sargassum seaweeds or anything like this.
Oh, like okay. I said, okay.
Probably like Spartina.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. In fact, that's one of the
Okay.
species we're actually going to be using on this thing.
So
literally,
it's going to float, but it's typically is something that would be anchored into sediment on the edge of.
That's correct.
Lagoons.
Now,
Okay.
Instead of putting the minerals on, you just put it on a mat.
Gotcha.
and
Okay.
off it
Much
goes.
better.
this actually takes it a little bit further because the roots tend to grow down, and eventually what it actually does is it creates a little bit of an environment for fish and this sort of thing. So it's a little bit better than if you were to actually plant them.
Sure.
So.
Commissioner Wheeler. Yeah, all of this is great, and I think Indian River County's done this in the past with the wastewater plant out west of town.
Yeah,
We're one
on
of
a
the first in
freshwater
the state
basis,
to do that. I just wonder, what's the potential downside?
Scary.
A lot of good things sound good, but is there a potential downside? In other words, with the plant, for instance, the floating plant, et cetera, can it get out and take over the river? I don't know, but there's got to be some downsides that you're looking at when you do this, and I just wonder what they are.
Let's start from the very beginning. The criteria, the one criteria that was given to the Spoonbill Marsh in terms of its permitting was that it must create a net environmental positive benefit. That primarily is a design for nitrogen phosphorus uptake. That's what it was primarily designed as being. Now, the plants that we're using are natural. As Commissioner O'Brien said, these are the type of sea grasses that you see that actually along the shorelines there. So it's not like you're using water hyacinths. It's not a type of plant system that would actually become an exotic that you'd have to get rid of. This is part of the natural environment. That's one of the reasons it was very specific and very unique to this, because you had to get very natural marine types of plants in the process. If there's a downside to this process, it was originally when we went into the project to decide whether we wanted to do it or not, because the real question was, would we be able to achieve this magic net environmental positive benefit? In other words, would we see nitrogen phosphorus reduction? We felt very strongly that this would be the case. The reality is, the data has shown, and I will say that we have elected to use Harbor Ranch Laboratories. I mean, we felt we'd go with the state-of-the-art in terms of deciding whether the data supported what we were testing was doing. The data backs itself up. DEP reviews the data. The Florida, Marine Resource Council has backed the data up. I mean, it's just everything that we had envisioned plus some has come to task with this. So if there was a downside, it was originally, and the success now has sort of speaking for itself.
Any other comments from the commissioners?
One quick thing, we are intending to have an open ribbon cutting thing. This thing is becoming so popular. We're looking to try to do it in the next 60 days. Probably the first week in May, we'll have everything in place and the weather will be nice, and so we'll set up something out there.
Just oyster fry.
Henry, we want the press there, Henry.
On a bed of grass.
Your editors come down.
We invite Henry.
This chair?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move staff recommendation.
The motion approval from Commissioner O'Brien, second from Commissioner Fleischer. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0. And Ian, I didn't want to leave you out. We hope that you'll be able to make that open house also. No, we're not going to eat the oysters.
Oysters on the menu?
Oh, yeah, we are.
No, we're not.
Oh, yes, we are, Mr.
Not
Chairman.
eating the oysters yet.
You got a mouse in your pocket?
They need to do their job and clean our lagoon.
Moving on to item 13A, County Attorney's Matters, approval of mediated settlement agreement with Stephen and Shelley Ryan. Hello, Mr. Dubrow.
Good morning, Commissioners. Bill DeBrawl, Deputy County Attorney. The Board today has an opportunity to approve a mediated settlement agreement with Stephen and Shelley Ryan, the property owners at 6775 66th Avenue. The Ryans are the owners of a 5-acre parcel of property out on 66th Avenue. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. You can see the aerial there that I've brought up. The outline in red is the property's boundaries. The yellow area is the area of take. It's approximately 1 acre in size, or 20% of the Ryans' property. And also, if you could take a look in the area of take, outlined in yellow, you can see the buffering that's going to be eliminated when the county goes through and develops the road project. Mr. and Mrs. Ryan were very careful to design their drives, and those are all concrete drives that you can see there, to design those drives to provide the greatest amount of privacy to their property. Back in February of 2009, we made an unconditional offer to the Ryans of $94,645 for the parcel. That was a 15% incentive above our initial appraisal. In preparation of trial, we went ahead and retained our trial appraiser. His value came in just a little bit higher at $102,600. In contrast, you can see that the Ryans' appraiser came in at $350,000. So we went ahead at the mediation. We arrived at a proposed settlement as follows: that the county would pay the sum of $202,500 for the property. There would be attorney's fees in the amount of $35,592 pursuant to the statute, expert witness fees in the amount of $30,175, for a total settlement of $268,267.15. Additionally, we would restore the 2 drives that would be lost during the construction project, and we would also attempt to replace some of the buffer that would be lost during construction by planting a type A buffer of landscape plants within that first 17 feet from the back of the sidewalk to the property line. As far as the risk, you can see where I've taken 2 different proposed jury awards, one more favorable to the county of $150,000. The county would still have a total cost of $264,276 if you take a look at your risk on the high side with a favorable jury verdict to the Ryans at $300,000. The county would pay over $463,000 if we would, in a sense, lose at trial. For those reasons, staff recommends the mediated settlement agreement and for a total cost of the $268,267.15. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to respond.
Commissioner Wheeler.
Yeah, just curious on one question anyway. This is a 5-acre parcel. It's west of 66, so it's zoned, I believe, 1 unit per 5 acres.
Correct.
So when we reduce that 5 acres to 4 acres, and their house is destroyed by a hurricane over 50%, can they rebuild?
Yes, it would be a legal nonconformity.
Now, well, maybe I don't want to, I'll ask you later. I just wonder whether there was some other properties where we ran into where we made it, the conformity wasn't there any longer and the piece of property went away. But okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this would be a non-conforming lot of record. It's still the A1 zoning. Where the issue was up on 66th Avenue whenever they had to replace a structure that was grandfathered in, which was a manufactured home, a mobile home. And the problem is our statute, or excuse me, our ordinance stated basically that if you were to replace something like that under the acts of God, like the hurricane, you'd have to do it to the exact same footprint. Problem with that is whenever they built it back in 1967, the existing mobile home, you couldn't get one like that. And so that's whenever they came in, they needed the variance. And we just basically made it work.
Any other questions for Mr. DeBrawl? There being none, Chair will entertain a motion.
Move staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Davis, a second from Commissioner Wheeler. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you very much, Mr. DeBrawl. Next item up is under My Matters. It's septic tank laws. There's a septic tank law, S-Bill 550, which required septic tank inspections. It was postponed for, I believe, about 6 months, or the implementation was delayed for about 6 months. And I just want to know the Commission's feeling to see if they want to join with some other counties to have a resolution to ask the Florida legislature to make this delay in implementation permanent.
I would.
I would too. I will note that it's inconsistent with our comprehensive land use plan, which suggests that we ought to go through this type of thing with education and not through regulation. And it's a very expensive item, which will be particularly onus on many of our families at this time. So,
Mr. Chairman,
you need a motion for resolution?
I'll be happy to get a motion.
So moved.
We have a motion from Commissioner Flesher.
Mr. Chairman.
A second from Commissioner Wheeler. Question from Commissioner Davis.
Mr. Plackowicz, I believe I'd probably have to abstain from this.
I don't think so.
My brother's in the septic business. No?
Not close enough because
This would hurt his business, not help it.
Well, it doesn't say.
Well, I'll let Mr. Plackowicz.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate that. It's not y'all.
I understand. We don't mind putting you in harm's way.
Help his business.
I think you're in that area where if you feel there is a conflict, there's a provision in 286 that if there's the appearance of a conflict, then you have essentially the discretion to not vote.
Gentlemen, I don't know how this is going to wind up. I know where I personally feel on it, and I don't say that I agree with you. But clearly a family member in the statute in this instance is defined as a brother, and I'd just soon back off and let y'all have the ordinance if that's okay.
That's fine. Any other comments or questions?
You just want to do a draft resolution very similar to the Baker County one?
Similar to the Baker. There are a couple of provisions in there that have to be revised because I think there's an interior, but basically something similar to that.
Perfect.
Thank you for bringing it up.
Now, Mr. Plackowicz, would I need to report the abstention to direct for the resolution to be written, and then whenever it gets approved? So there'd be two abstention notices on this?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're creating a lot of paperwork there, Wesley.
Yes.
Welcome to my world.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 4-0 with one abstention, Commissioner Davis. My second item was on a trip to Tallahassee, which I'm going to take about March 22nd. Going to meet with the delegation, and I just wanted to get some sense of, from my fellow commissioners, of what their most important issues for Tallahassee were at this time, so I could sort of prioritize it and have maybe the 4 or 5 items where I'd spend the most time with our delegation on, and maybe see somebody else up in Tallahassee related to those issues if possible.
I think the number one for me would be what we just discussed about the,
Governor's recommendation on the pension?
yeah,
That's fine.
and the other one would be one that we don't agree on.
Which is which?
It was doubling the,
Okay, we'll get to that you've lost that one.
Chairman Solari, I did leave off the one that you mentioned that I can't remember the one, it's not on this list, that dealing with Bob Keating and the energy.
697.
I did leave this off.
Yeah, I'll probably tie that in with some other things, basically less regulation, which would include things like the septic tanks, the irrigation, and fertilizer ordinances. I'll just lump that under that one. I mean, for me personally, my biggest thrust is going to try to get or support all that our delegation is doing to roll back regulation in every area. Any other questions or comments? And what I'm going to ask Joe is if you can take some of these the same way I asked Jason to come up with a one-page brief on these, so I'd have some good talking points and better understanding of the county's position. If you can look at 3 or 4 of these that you think are the most important, and I can get with you later, but I want to be able to go up with a one-page brief on each of the most important points or topics so that I have something that's easy for the delegation to understand, which I can leave with them when I depart from the doors. So,
Mr. Chair, that's fine, but didn't I read an email the other day where the bill that they were talking about eliminating the enterprise zone had died?
Pulled, yes.
Yeah, sorry
We can
about
scratch
that.
that one.
Yeah, otherwise,
And on some of these where we think that they're doing the right thing, we can just say good job on it.
Yeah.
Almost on the enterprise zone, we can say that, we're happy you did this on the enterprise zone, that sort of thing.
absolutely.
What would we, I think on one of the things that probably you and I disagree on, Bob, is two commissioners sitting here, and I don't know, but on the community redevelopment agencies and stuff, such as Treasure Coast Regional Planning and what they're doing with DCA and so on and so forth, that's going to be an issue this year. And
It's different from community
CRAs,
redevelopment agencies.
yeah.
It's different topics.
It doesn't tie into that.
Well, it might, it's the funding mechanism and how they don't contribute to the general, and to the, like, the sheriff's department, or the,
I think
it
that's
freezes.
Joe's issue, I think, is the economic impact or the tax impact on the county with CRA.
Yeah.
So I'll let Joe.
Yeah, what happens is that we get like 10% of the adjustment in value, yet we still have to deliver police, sheriff has to deliver services, health department, court system, and all those keep going and growing, and the CRA takes all our money, and we have a problem because we still have to keep those basic services going.
I misspoke.
I didn't know.
No.
Okay. I agree with you.
If we're good on that.
Well, usually it's pointed out with a 4-1 vote.
Not often.
Yeah, that's where we're using our velvet gloves, right?
Motion to say Commissioner Wheeler misspoke.
Okay, I don't think we need a motion or vote on that one. I'll move on to Commissioner Gary Wheeler, request for discussion.
Yeah, there's been a lot of work going on, a lot of staff time being spent, my understanding, with not only the attorney's office, the clerk's office, and our office, and trying to gather information about boards and stuff that have existed for a few decades, because we're looking at changing the terms on those boards or cleaning them up. And my only question is I'd just like to better understand why we're trying to gain all the history. I had one secretary talk to me about, who was on the board, what did they do, what business they were involved in, et cetera, back in the 80s when I was on. And I'm just wondering if we're spending a lot of staff time that's not necessary, or maybe it is necessary. I don't have an answer to that, and that's why I'm asking. And due to the Sunshine Law, I wasn't able to talk to you, Bob, about that specifically. I did talk to Mr. Polakowicz about it, but I'd just like to know if we're spending a lot of time that is or is not necessary, and what's the objective in trying to get all the detail.
Well, this wasn't anything that was driven by me, so I'll turn it over to Mr. Polakowicz.
Yes, last summer you had an action in which you decreased the number of committees that the county has, but you still have about, and I'm not sure of the number, but I'll say 15 to 20 committees. Each of those committees has underneath it what I'll call a formative document, which is either a statute, an ordinance, or a resolution, which defines the committee, defines the number of members, defines the terms, etc. Typically, the task of following those committees and keeping track of the terms of the different members has been a function that's been performed within the commission staff. In fact, under the code, you used to have a position called the executive aide to the Board of County Commissioners, and by code it was that person's function to keep track of the terms and the various happenings on these various committees. So the way this actually started was back in December, one of the commission aides came to us, and, well, let me even come back a little bit further. As you know, you eliminated the executive aide position, and as I understand it, thereafter, the task of trying to keep up with these committees kind of circulated among the different commission aides that you had. So back in December, one of the commission aides who at that time this task was apparently assigned to came to us and essentially said that the staff had lost track, essentially, of the membership terms of the various people on these committees. There was a disconnect between what was happening on the terms of the members versus whatever the underlying foundation document said the terms should be. And she asked that we take a look at that and help her basically get everything back into alignment. It turned out that that commission aide transferred out of that department, and then we were approached by a second commission aide, which I assume is the next one to whom the task circulated, and she came in and basically said the same thing: would you help us try to get everything back in sync? So we started the task of gathering the foundation documents, trying to understand what the different terms were on all these different committees, and we've completed that task. We then decided that to get us on proper footing, what we needed to do was within each committee. For example, if you had 9 members and they were going to be 3-year terms and they were to stagger each year, 3 people being elected, we would look into each committee and try to line up the members of the committee with those particular terms. So going forward, we could say, okay, these 3 people are on this cycle, those 3 people that cycle, etc. That really is where most of the effort came, because what we tried to do, rather than just arbitrarily assign individuals to terms, we tried to go back into the minutes and find out when the different members joined the different committees to see if we could find some semblance of history that would enable us to then assign these different terms to the different members. We're about, I would say, 90% done right now. Okay. So our hope is we will come back to this board within probably 30 days, and we will have a couple of things. Number one of the problems that we have is all of your committees, as I say, have a foundation document. Most of those foundation documents talk about what the terms are. But if they don't, there is then a general provision in the code that says, if you don't have something more specific, here is what the terms are. That provision in the code is internally incorrect. There's simply an error in it. So we're going to come back with an ordinance to correct that, number one. And number two, we'll come back with a resolution which will, with respect to each committee, say, here are your members, the board-appointed members are the ones we're focusing on. So here are your board-appointed members. They are supposed to be on and again, 2-year, 3-year, 4-year term, whatever it is under the foundation document. And here is our suggestion for how you decide who within the committee is on, has 2 years left, has 1 year left, or whatever. The only alternative, I think, to that, to try to create some type of historical perspective, is really just to assign them perhaps by random. If you wanted to just at this point say, well, you got 9 people, 3-year cycles, so we're just going to pick them out of the hat, and these 3 will have 1 year left, 3 year left, 2 years left, 3 years left. We could do that too. But at this point, as I say, we're about 90% done, and once we finish, I think that the responsibility will go back into the commission aides, but at that point we'll have a solid starting point that they can monitor going forward. That's what's happening.
Okay, I was just, because we were going back 25 years and trying to find out, did you know so-and-so, several of them were deceased, and what capacity did they serve? So I was saying when we went back to adjust this, we'd be looking at either the resolution or the ordinance and pulling that up and saying, okay, here's the resolution, here's the ordinance, let's go ahead and make the changes we need to change. And I didn't know why all the history was necessary. It was like, we weren't building a yearbook or a historical thing. So that was my question. But anyway, we're almost finished, and I think probably reevaluating our ordinances and our resolutions on this is probably a good idea. But that was just my question as to why the in-depth. So I'm happy.
Okay, and I don't.
That's what's important.
Yeah, as long as you go away happy, Commissioner Wheeler.
And I'm glad that you all understand that.
Yeah, well, it's the job of us four to do that, and we understand.
Absolutely.
We move on to Commissioner Peter O'Brien. He wants to discuss the resolution opposing Senate Bill 270 and House Bill 511.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your backup is the proposed wording for a resolution, as you stated, opposed. When I first brought this up, it was just Senate Bill 270, and there is a companion House Bill 511. What these two bills are proposing is to double, or actually more than double on House Bill 511, but to as a minimum, double the discount available if you pay your property taxes early. In your backup, you'll see that according to our budget office, this will result in a reduction in our ad valorem revenue of $3.6 to $3.7 million. To me, this is clearly an unfunded mandate where Tallahassee is reducing our budget. In addition, this will have impacts on other taxing districts such as the school district, the hospital district, and any other taxing district. It will also result in increases in millage rates to certain of our ad valorem taxes, such as the approved bond issues and the MSTU. And this is where it will really impact our low-income citizens, the folks that do not have the cash, that they're living paycheck to paycheck. They can't afford to pay the property tax early, so they'll never get the discount benefit. But when we have to raise the millage rate in these certain line items, they're going to pay more in taxes. So it's going to be a disproportionate burden on our lower income residents. And again, it's just an unfunded mandate. It's Tallahassee meddling in our budget. I think if we want to lower our taxes, we can certainly do that with three votes. But to have this forced upon us from Tallahassee, I think is wrong. Basically, it's another tax break for the rich. And so with that, I'd like to make a motion that the board adopt the resolution to oppose Senate Bill 270 and House Bill 511.
Second. Commissioner Fletcher beat me to it.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, if you'd like that.
No, you go ahead. I'm putting it down as Commissioner Fletcher for the second and Commissioner O'Brien for the motion to oppose Senate Bill 270 and House Bill 511. And I'll be beginning the discussion from my left.
Thank you. Yeah, the same arguments I had before. I disagree with Commissioner O'Brien on this. I don't see it as a $3.7 million potential reduction in our income. I see it as a potential $3.7 million savings to the taxpayers. I also don't buy the argument that because of one's income, they can't pay their taxes early and take advantage of the 8%. In fact, that should give them incentive to pay the taxes early. You pay your taxes once a year if you pay your property taxes, and I don't know why it would make a difference whether you paid it in April or paid it in November. You got to come up with the money once a year to pay your property taxes, and it would give incentive for those and would save them their 8%. The other thing is, I don't think because this is done, you have to look at just raising millage. You can also look at making more cuts in government. And lastly, to hit on it one more time, is I think this also helps particularly commercial development and commercial businesses, because they are not homesteaded. They're businesses, and we talked about cutting impact fees and so on and so forth to help them. They not only have the highest value properties, they pay the highest property taxes, and this would give them an opportunity to pay in November and save 8% instead of 4%, or the reduction of 8% to 6%. It's doubling it all the way down the line. So I just disagree that this is a bad thing. I don't think it benefits the rich, and I don't think you're taking anything away from the poor. I just disagree with it. I don't like that philosophy anyway, that every time somebody makes something, somebody's got to lose something. So I plan on voting against the resolution.
Very good. Commissioner O'Brien, you've really pretty much stated your case. Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, I look at this. I'm not going to support it. I supported to be able to look at it, but now it's in front of me here. When you look at the way that services are funded, the commercial properties, they do really add to the tax base. As far as the services they need, I'm going to say is rather small versus residential. When you look at a oceanfront home that may pay $20,000 a year in taxes, I think that's clear to say that there perhaps is not a $20,000 burden to any River County as far as what they receive in services. And so, if somebody has the opportunity to take advantage of a tax cut, I'm going to let them do so. So that's my position. Thank you.
Commissioner Fletcher.
Basically, we've said in previous discussion, I don't believe that it benefits those who need the benefit at this time, and I don't believe that there's too many people that can bring forward and pay their taxes early. There's a lot of folks that are in the chain that are behind a year or two, and for that reason, this just doesn't make good business sense.
And for me, there's, the basic, as I understood it, financial justification for this going back some years ago was the idea that if you didn't have that incentive to pay early, then all the money was lumped up in basically January. And by having a reasonable discount, you established a more orderly flow of funds, which helped the county. And this turns out to be a 12% annualized rate of return. That should be all the incentive anybody needs for something like that. And to say that you now need a 24% rate of return in order to incentivize you to pay early, I think is giving it a totally different purpose, which is beyond my limited scope. And I will say this is another state mandate. I think we need to be on the right side of being against all state mandates, not just some which are against our philosophy or for our philosophy, but basically against all state mandates. But a particularly troublesome aspect of this, which I was thinking about during the week, is that if this is an incentive to pay early, then this is another attempt on the part of government to modify the behavior of the taxpayers and using our tax code to modify the behavior of our taxpayers, which I understand is a very progressive idea, but I'm much too conservative to try to use the tax code to foist progressive ideas or methodologies in any of our counties. So for that reason, I'm going to be supporting Commissioner O'Brien's.
I would call your position more progressive than mine.
No, that's because you don't really understand the dynamics of it. But I'd be happy to explain it after the vote.
Well, as Reagan said, it's not that, what was it? But not that liberals...
Yes, yeah. Read the book first, Commissioner.
They know a lot about something that isn't.
Absolutely, due to say.
So if there are no other comments, we'll go ahead and call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. I'm sorry, was that it, Commissioner Davis?
No, that was...
I just wanted to say...
You started quiet at that point.
All those opposed.
Okay. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes 3-2. Commissioners Davis and Wheeler opposing. Thank you, gentlemen. Moving on. And there's a second item under Commissioner O'Brien's matters, which is the schedule for some youth baseball activities at the minor league sports field.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. A lot of people always ask what's going on at Dodgertown, and it's always been a struggle to get some of the news out in the local paper. They just don't seem to think baseball activities at Dodgertown are important anymore, so we don't get the coverage we should that the people are asking for. So I just want to let the public know that spring baseball is up and running again at Dodgertown. The minor league baseball, they have scheduled over 70 teams from 24 states and also Canada. Will be playing baseball out at the Sports Village over the next 2 months. They will continue until the end of April. And these teams are all coming here, a lot of from the Northeast and such. They're coming here. They're staying a week. They're either going to be housed at the conference facility at the Village or in our local hotels. With the college and the high school teams, they bring a lot of parents and grandparents that stay in our other hotels. Last year, this tournament generated about 4,300 room nights in the local community and had a several $1 million economic benefit. So I just want to let the public know that baseball is alive and well. I would like ask the board if they would be amenable to us having a link to the schedule on our homepage so that if we can't get the local paper to provide good coverage, at least we can have it on our website where folks can very quickly and easily find the schedule and go out and see some of these teams play some good baseball.
And I think that's a wonderful idea.
I think it's a great idea. Counselor, is there any constraint on that?
Just information.
No. Do you perceive any? That's a wonderful suggestion.
Okay. And I'll be glad to give Henry and Ian a copy of the schedule so they can run it today.
Okay, Commissioner O'Brien, that's the form of a motion.
I'll make it a motion.
And a second from Commissioner Flesher. Any other comments? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Moving on to Environmental Control Board, a quarterly report for the first quarter of the fiscal year 2010-2011.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve from Commissioner Davis, a second from Commissioner Flesher. Any discussion? There being none, I'll call the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. And
Mr. Chairman,
If you want, you have it.
I didn't bring it up at the beginning of the meeting, but I see the sheriff is here. Sheriff, yes, I'll bring attention to you on this one. The Sheriff's Office annual barbecue, which is fast approaching. It's been conducted, yes, tomorrow. It's been conducted by the past few administrations. It's been a very successful endeavor. I believe that Indian River County has been at the forefront of donations to the program for the youth ranches, and duly recognized. All of the sheriffs have done an outstanding job. But Sheriff, how about a wind-up plug for the barbecue for tomorrow?
2P to 7P on our 47-acre campus. We'd love to see you, chicken and pork and all the fixings. So I look forward to seeing each and every one of you there. Mr. Barrett's got a private invitation, so look forward to seeing him.
Do we have any, a lot of demonstrations and presentations?
Great demonstrations. 17th annual K-9 demonstrations. The mounted posse from Lake County will be there yet again, so it'll be a great time, and hopefully the weather will hold out.
Sheriff, do you know offhand how much money has been raised with the barbecue over the years?
On average, $40,000 a year times about 17 years. What is that, 700,000?
It's great to be number one in something, right?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Sheriff, thank you very much.
Thank you,
With
Sheriff.
that, there being no other business, we are adjourned.